Have you a strong will? This is the title of the book that we are now reading here in this channel by Charles Godfrey Leland. It is in the public domain. I found that the previous chapter was a little bit wordy for me, yet I was able to dig out its golden nugget. And it was the idea of morality and goodness and the love of art to wake up within us the, I would say, spirit of creation. And many of you might be able to relate with this or understand where I'm coming from, as especially in the school systems in America, as of late, have been cutting back on their programs of art and also crafts. I remember when I was a little girl, and I've admitted I'm 60 years old, so when I was in the education system in America, they were offering music and art, and it was like home economics and shop, where you can come home with a little birdhouse or a little lantern, or you could have a skill, you know how to sew or basic cooking. And I remember one of the first instruments they would give you is a recorder, and you would driving the parents crazy, blowing the little flute everywhere. And I don't know where along the line the education system felt that that was not important. I could tell you it is very important. Somehow, the love of the arts, the ability to see that you can do something with your hands, that your brain can open up to different portals and imagine, and you can paint things that you're not even looking at, begins to open a portal inside, which I would say is part of the law of attraction, which maybe, in my opinion, somebody was aware of this and wanted to subdue that in the human being. I don't know why, but we are ready, and I am excited to usher in a golden era for humanity. And me going through these books and looking for golden nuggets, I believe somehow together, you and I, we're going to find it. And we, each one, you in your place, me and mine, are going to begin to blossom through and activate this new era. How? Well, when each one of us works on ourselves, we can but only improve ourselves and those around us, and in that sense, begin to impact our local businesses, our local governments, and before we know it, it might take a decade or two, but things will change for the better. Let's move on to the next chapter. Chapter 7. That there are only two possible methods of developing memory, the associative and the direct, by means of will. The art memorandi of old time, the process of developing memory hypnotically, illustration of memory, the system in education. 'Twas wisely said by Plato when he called memory the mother of the intellect, for knowledge is to wisdom what his realm is to a monarch, that over which he rules. And he who hath the will can ever win such empire to himself. Will can do all. There is nothing in which the might of the will can be so clearly set forth as in the making of memory. By means of it, as is fully proved by millions of examples, man can render his power of recollection almost infinite. And lest the reader may think that I here exaggerate, I distinctly assert that I never knew a man of science, familiar with certain facts which I shall repeat, who ever denied its literal truth. As I have already stated, there are two methods, and only two, by means of which we retain images, facts, or ideas. One of these is that which, in many varied forms, which are all the same in fact, is described in the old art memorandi, or arts of memory. Footnote. One of the 16th century in my possession, and which is indeed rarissime, professes to teach how to remember all things by the hand alone, that is to say, by the digits, joints, and lines of the palm, which may remind some readers how, when schoolboys, they wrote divers tasks on the same, which they ought to have inscribed on the tablets of memory, For treason, when detected, the palm was deservedly feruled. Palmam qui merui forat. End of footnote. There are several hundreds of these, and to the present day there are professors who give instructions according to systems of the same kind. These are all extremely plausible, being based on association of ideas, and in most cases the pupil makes great progress for a short time. Thus, we can remember the French for bread, pain, Italian, pain, by thinking of the pan in which bread is baked, or the difficult name of the inventor, Szczepanik, pronounced nearly Szczepanik, by thinking of a crowd of frightened women, and which I remembered by the fact that pain is the Slavonian for Mr. or Sir, for there is such a tendency of ideas to agglutinate, and so become more prominent. As we can see two bubbles together in a pool more readily than one, then we can very soon learn to recall many images in this way. But after a time, a certain limit is reached, which most minds cannot transgress. Volapük was easy so long as, like Pidgin English, it contained only a few hundred words and no grammar. But now that it has a dictionary of 4,000 terms and a complete grammar, it is as hard to learn as Spanish. It invariably comes to pass in learning to remember by the associative method that after a time images are referred to images and these to others again, so that they form entire categories in which the most vigorous mind gets lost. The other method is that of direct memory guided by will, in which no regard is paid to association, especially in the beginning. Thus, to remember anything, or rather to learn how to do so, we take something which is very easy to retain, the easier the better, be it a jingling nursery rhyme, a proverb, or a text. Let this be learned to perfection, backwards and forwards, or by the permutation of words, and repeated the next day. Note that the repetition or reviewing is of more importance than aught else. On the second day, add another proverb or verse to the preceding, and so on, day by day, always reviewing and never learning another syllable until you are sure that you perfectly or most familiarly retain all which you have memorized. The result will be, if you persevere, that before long you will begin to find it easier to remember anything. This is markedly the case as regards the practice of reviewing, which is invariably hard at first, but which becomes ere long habitual and then easy. I cannot impress it too vividly on the mind of the reader that he cannot make his exercises too easy. If he finds that 10 lines a day are too much, let him reduce them to 5 or 2 or 1 or even a single word. But learn that and persevere. When the memory begins to improve under this process, the task may, of course, be gradually increased. An uncle of the present Khedive of Egypt told me that when he was learning English, he at first committed to memory 50 words a day, but soon felt himself compelled to very much reduce the number in order to permanently remember what he acquired. One should never overdrive a willing horse. Where there is a teacher with youthful pupils, he can greatly aid the process of mere memorizing by explaining the text, putting questions as to its meaning, or otherwise awakening an interest in it. After a time, the pupils may proceed to verbal memorizing, which consists of having the text simply read or repeated to them. In this way, after a year or 18 months of practice, most people can actually remember a sermon or lecture word for word. This was the process which was discovered, I may say simultaneously, by David Kay and myself, as our books upon it appeared at almost the same time. But since then I have modified my plan and made it infinitely easier and far more valuable, as will be apparent to all, by the application of the principles laid down in this book. For while, according to the original views, memory depended on will and perseverance, there was no method indicated by any writer how these were to be created, nor was energetic forethought considered as amounting to more than mere intention. Now, I would say that having the task selected, first give energetic forethought or a considerate determination to master it. This should precede all attempts to learn by everybody, young or old. And when the lesson is mastered, let it be repeated with earnestness and serious attention before going to sleep, with the will that it shall be remembered on the morrow. And it will be found that this process not only secures the memory desired, but also greatly facilitates the whole course and process. It is to be noted that by this or any process, we do not remember everything, but only what is first considered and measured by forethought. Also that by it, the memory is never overcharged at the expense of intellect, for the exertion of will in any way strengthens the mind. To explain the immense power which this all implies, I observe that previous to the invention of printing, it was usual for students to get their textbooks by heart. Thus, in India, according to Max Muller, the entire text and glosses of Panini's Sanskrit grammar were handed down orally for 350 years before being committed to writing. This work is about equal in size to the Bible. There are Indian priests now living who can repeat accurately the whole poems of the Mahabharata of 300,000 slokas or lines. That these incredible feats were the result of a system of memorizing similar to what I have explained. That the Guzlas or Slavonian minstrels of the present day have by heart, with remarkable accuracy, immensely long epic poems, I have found the same among Anglokan Indians, whose sagas or mythic legends are interminable, and yet are committed word by word accurately. I have heard in England of a lady 90 years of age whose memory was miraculous, and of which extraordinary instances are narrated by her friends. She attributed it to the fact that when young, she had been made to learn a verse from the Bible every day, and then constantly review it. As her memory improved, she learned more, the result being that in the end she could repeat from memory any verse or chapter called for in the whole scripture. The habit had marvelously developed her intelligence as well as memory. Now I confidently declare that if this lady had submitted what she learned to the hypnotic will process, she could have spared herself half the labor. And it is to be observed that as in time the labor of reviewing and the faculty of promptly recalling becomes easier and easier till it is simply mechanical, so the memorizing by hypnotism becomes more facile, until it is, so to speak, only a form. And as it becomes easier, the foresight strengthens till it wields an absolute power. If the reader is interested in this subject of developing the memory, I would refer him to work on Practical Education, in which it is discussed with reference to recalling objects through all the senses. Footnote: Practical Education, London, Whitaker and Company, Volume Number 2, White Hart Street, Paternoster Square, EC. End of footnote. No one who has made even a very slight trial of the process of impressing on the mind before sleep something which must be remembered can fail to be convinced ere long of the truth that there is in it a marvelous power which will with ease and continued practice enable him to recall whatever he pleases. It follows, as a matter of course, that this would be of incredible value in education, but notwithstanding the vast discussion of this subject which is ever going on, it does not seem to occur to a living man that we should develop and train the mental faculties such as memory and quickness of perception, as well as set them to hard work. It is also safe to say that there is not a man living who was educated from boyhood upon this principle, and yet I am confident that no scientist in existence, knowing the facts on which my statement is based, will deny that it is as easy to develop the mental factors alluded to as to learn a language or play on the piano. It is not a matter of theory, but of facts. Millions of men have in the past acquired the faculty of being able to repeat and remember whatever they heard if they earnestly attended to it. Earnest attention in this case means a strong exercise of forethought or determination to an end or given purpose. In Iceland, that which has become the English common law was at an early date very fully developed, without any books or writing, and there were lawyers who had by heart all the laws, and incredible numbers of precedents, as appears from several sagas, among others that of the burnt Jarl. Our present system of education is that of building houses without foundations. No one suspects or dreams what mighty powers there are latent in us all, or how easily they may be developed. It would not be so reprehensible if men entirely neglected the subject, but they are always working hard and spending millions on the old system, and will not even make the least experiment to test a new theory. One reason for this is the old belief that we are all born with a certain quantum of gifts, as for example memory, capacity, patience, etc., all more or less limited, and in reality not to be enlarged or improved. The idea is natural because we see that there are very great differences, hereditary or otherwise, in children. But it is false. So we go to work to fill up the quantum of memory as soon as possible by violent cramming, and in like manner tax to the utmost all the mental faculties without making the least effort to prepare, enlarge, or strengthen them. I shall not live to see it, but a time will come when this preparation of the mental faculties will be regarded as the basis of all education. To recapitulate in a few words, when we desire to fix anything in the memory, we can do so by repeating it to ourselves before we go to sleep, accompanying it with the resolution to remember it in future. We must not in the beginning set ourselves any but very easy tasks, and the practice must be steadily continued. It has often been said that a perfect memory is less of a blessing than the power of oblivion. Thus, Themistocles, who according to Cato, as cited by Cicero, knew the names and faces of every man in Athens, having offered to teach someone the art of memory, received for reply, "Rather teach me how to forget. Esse facturum si se oblicisi, que velet quam si merminisse docuiste." And Claudius had such an enviable power in the latter respect that immediately after he had put to death his wife Messalina, he forgot all about it, asking, "Cur domina non venire?" Why the missus didn't come. While on the following day, after condemning several friends to death, he sent invitations to them to come and dine with him. And again, there are people who have, as it were, two memories, one good, the other bad, as was the case with Calvisius Sabrinus, who could recall anything in literature but never remembered the names of his own servants or even his friends. But he got over the difficulty by naming his 9 attendants after the 9 muses, while he called his intimates Homer, Hesiod, and so on. This scholar would truly seem to have drunk on the 2 fountains sacred to Trophonius by the river of Alcomenus in Beda, one of which bestowed memory and the other oblivion. And like unto them is the power of the will. Aided by forethought and hypnotism, For while it properly directs and aids us to remember what we will, it, per contra, also helps us to forget. End of chapter 7. Stay right here in this video. As we continue to the next chapter, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share this with your friends, grab your coffee, grab your tea, and whatever time of day it is, grab your wine. I'm flipping the page to chapter 8. The action of the will and hypnotism on the constructive faculties, the connection of manual skill with quickness of perception and intellect, school experiences, design and its application, how to facilitate invention in art. A quote by a German proverb. He who hath learned a single art can thrive, I ween, in any part. End quote. A quote by Wordsworth. He would have taught you how you might employ yourself, and many did to him repair, and certes, not in vain, he had inventions rare. End quote. When I had, after many years of study and research in England and on the continent, developed the theory that all practical, technical education of youth should be preceded by a light or easy training on an aesthetic basis or the minor arts, I, for 4 years, to test the scheme, was engaged in teaching in the city of Philadelphia, every week in separate classes, 200 children, besides a number of ladies. These were from the public schools of the city. The total number of these public pupils was then 110,000. My pupils were taught, firstly, simple outline decorative design with drawing at the same time. After this, according to sex, easy embroidery, wood carving, modeling in clay, leather work, carpenting, inlaying, repoussé, modeling in clay, porcelain painting, and other small arts. Nearly all the pupils who were from 10 to 16 years of age acquired 2 or 3, if not all, of these arts, and then very easily found employment in factories or fabrics, etc. Footnote. On one occasion, a manufacturer offered to take 40 pupils out of the drawing or designing class of 60 and pay them each £1 a week, with prospect of a further increase at the end of 6 months. End of footnote. Many people believe that this was all waste of money and time, and quite unknown to me, at their instigation, an inquiry was made of all the teachers in the public schools as to the standing of my art pupils in their other classes, it being confidently anticipated that they would be found to have fallen behind. And the result of the investigation was that the 200 were in advance of the 110,000 in every branch: geography, arithmetic, history, and so on. It was not remarkable because boys and girls who had, at an average age of 12 or 13, learned the principles of design and its practical application to several kinds of handiwork, and knew the differences in characteristic of Gothic, Arabesque, or Greek patterns, all developed a far greater intelligence in general thought and conversation than others. They had at least one topic on which they could converse intelligently with any grown-up person, and in which they were really superior to most. They soon found this out. I have often been astonished in listening to their conversation among themselves to hear how well they discussed art. They all well knew at least one thing, which is far from being known among atheists in London, which is that in decorative art, however you may end in all kinds of mixtures of styles, you must at least begin with organic development and not put roots or flowers at both ends of a branch or vine. The secret of it all is that those who from an early age develop the constructive faculty, especially if this be done in a pleasing, easy manner with agreeable work, also develop with it the intellect, and that very rapidly to a very remarkable degree. There are reasons for this. Drawing, when properly taught, stimulates visual perception or eye memory. This is strikingly the case when the pupil has a model placed in one room and after studying it goes into another room to reproduce it from memory. Original design, which when properly taught is learned with incredible ease by all children, stimulates observation to a remarkable degree. The result of such education is to develop a great general quickness of perception and thought. To verify this, the reader has but to practice designs on the lines or principles which, as they are the simplest and most coherent, I think are the best, and which I have explained to the best of my ability in a little work. Footnote: The Manual of Design, London, Whitaker and Company, White Hart Street, Paternoster Square, and Bell & Sons, York Street. End of footnote. While mastering this, he may apply his designs to panel carving, repoussé, sheet leatherwork, or any other minor art, the object being either to acquire agreeable or profitable occupation, or to give the mind a certain discipline. If he or she has never learned to make anything, or to use the hands in mechanism, or the brain in inventing, then the reader certainly cannot practically understand to what an extraordinary degree all this, allied to other habits of thought, study, and reflection, stimulates the mind. Now, be it observed that if anyone desires to learn design or any art, it may be greatly facilitated by the application to it of will and foresight, and in the beginning, self-hypnotism. He who understands the three as one sees in it a higher or more energetic kind of self-discipline than most people practice. In the end, they come to the same as a vigorous effort of the will. Thus, having mastered the very easy principles of design which govern all organic development or vegetable growth, as set forth in a plant with root, offshoots, or crochets and end ornaments, flowers or finials with the circle spiral and offshooting ornaments, rings made into vines and wave patterns, all of which can be understood in an hour with diagrams. Let the beginner attempt a design, the simpler the better, and reproduce it from memory. If on going to bed he will impress it on his mind that on the morrow he would like to make more designs or that it must be done, he will probably feel the impulse and succeed. This is the more likely because patterns impress themselves very vividly on the memory or imagination, and when studied are easily recalled after a little practice. The manner in which most artists form an idea or project their minds to a plan or invention, be it a statue or picture, and the way they think it over and anticipate it, very often actually seeing the picture in a finished state in imagination, all amounts to foresight and hypnotic preparation in a crude, imperfect form. If any artist who is gifted with resolution and perseverance will simply make trial of the method here recommended, he will assuredly find that it is a great aid to invention. It is probable that half the general average cleverness of man is due to their having learned, as boys, games or the art of making something, or mending and repairing. In any case, if they had learned to use their hands and their inventiveness or adaptability, they would have been the better for it. That the innumerable multitude of people who can do nothing of the kind, and who take no real interest in anything except spending money and gossiping, are to be really pitied, is true. Some of them once had minds, and these are the most pitiful or pitiable of all. It is to be regretted that novels are, with rare exceptions, written to amuse this class, and limit themselves strictly to life, never describing with real skill, so as to interest, anything which would make life worth living for, except love, which is good to a certain extent, but not absolutely all in all, save to the erotomaniac. And as most novelists now pretend to instruct and convey ideas beyond mere storytelling or even being interesting, which means the love or detective business, I would suggest to some of these writers that the marvelous latent powers of the human mind and also some art, which does not consist of the names and guidebook praises of a few great painters and the Renaissance réchauffé, would be a refreshing novelty. The ancient Romans were thoroughly persuaded that exercitation et usu, by exercising the physical faculties in every way, by which they meant arts as well as gymnastics, and by making such practice habitual, they could develop intellect, in illustration of which Lycurgus once took two puppies at the same litter and had the one brought up to hunt while the other was nursed at home in all luxury. And when grown and let loose, the one caught a hare while the other yelped and ran away. So the word handy in Old English hend, meaning quick, alert, or gifted with prompt perception, is derived from knowing how to use the hands. Footnote: the squire was courteous and hend, each man him loved and was his friend. The squire of low degree. End footnote. Brusonius, Face T. Lyons, 1562, has collected a great number of classic anecdotes to illustrate this saying. Recapitulation. Those who desire to become artists can greatly facilitate their work if, beginning, for example, with very simple outline, decorative designs, and having learned the principles on which they are constructed, they would repeat or revise them to themselves before sleep, resolving to remember them. The same principle is applicable to all kinds of designs, with the proviso that they be at first very easy. This is generally a very successful process. Forethought, or the projection of conception or attention with will, is a marvelous preparation for all kinds of artwork. He who can form the habit of seeing a picture mentally before he paints it has an incredible advantage and will spare himself much labor and painting out. End of chapter 8. All right, hit that like button. Head over to chapter 9, where we'll learn about fascination of others as in love.